implications of racial profiling being a necessary police practice?
Racial profiling is an unnecessary police practice that causes distrust in the community, distrust in law enforcement, and distrust in government.
Racial profiling plays a big role in law enforcement and politics in general too, because all the allegations of racial profiling are in law enforcement. And a study of a big research project was shown that racial profiling heightens pressure on law enforcement, and this causes law enforcement to not exactly get what they want and get the best solution, so they end up going for the easy one and a faster solution, which is going still with racial profiling, just keep it going. And racial profiling, as stated by Brandon Pant, a local police officer of Foxborough, Ohio, he said it can cause more of a problem than you started out with, and this happens because if you discriminate someone and just like help yourself or get there, it could like hurt them or make them offended, which could escalate things to somewhere you don't want to go. And then a study at 9/11 showed that ever since 9/11 happened, people of color have been discriminated against because there are people such as Muslims and Islamics helps start 9/11 and cause it, which causes law enforcement to be racially discriminating towards them. And then a study shows that 71% of all Californians say that black men are more likely, they think, to be discriminated towards police or from police. The laws affect racial profiling directly, and racial profiling affects laws. The first one is that study showed that colored people are more likely to be pulled over than whites, as shown by this graph here. 25% of the population of New York City is black, and then 50% of the stops in New York City were black too, which means there's a double of the amount of increase there, which means there should be double the population, but there isn't so. And then there's 33% of whites that are living in New York City, but only a third of them are getting pulled over, shown by the statistics. And then the stop and frisk law was a racial profiling law in New York City that was used by the NYPD, but a federal judge decided that it violates the Constitution because the 14th Amendment says that each race should have equal opportunity, equal rights and federal laws and everything in the law system. And body cameras were passed by a federal judge too in DC due to racial profiling issues and more, which Claire will bring that up.
Alright, so after only a year of implementing body cameras in California in 2013, a study found that complaints fell by 88%. There was less force used and less complaints being filed. The Department of Justice showed overall improvements in a separate study in which in areas that implement body cameras, they saw reduced force used and complaints. Another issue is accountability. Police aren't facing repercussions for their actions, and therefore they proceed to racial profile. Mr. Davis found himself, in 2015, in a law dispute with local police because while he was in custody, he was beaten while subdued, and the three police officers who attacked him did not face legal consequences because the judge found that police officers may have thought that it would still be constitutionally justified, even though he was subdued. Miami, Florida, in 2013, reported that the trials to determine if racial profiling was just or not took too long, and two of the police officers in the study had shot and killed at least one more person while under investigating shooting and killing someone. And you can see on the graph, pre-body cameras forced using complaints and post-body cameras forced using complaints, which significantly dropped. Militarization. So the Defense Department gave local law enforcement over $500,000 a year, according to their website, to purchase militaristic equipment such as grenade launchers, heavily armored vehicles, and more. The American Civil Liberties Union reported that 79% of SWAT team deployments were to execute a search warrant, which is the unneeded use of their ability and tactical skills.
To go off what Claire was saying about militarized police, communities that had militarized police, people in those communities associated them more with crime, and they didn't feel as safe. And with them not feeling safe, they didn't believe that the police would be able to help them, so they took matters into their own hands. And the police can't do their job effectively if the people aren't coming to them for help. And an example of the mistrust in the police was in Milwaukee. An African American was beaten by white officers after being falsely accused of stealing something from them. And after the news of this spread, the communities, the 911 calls in that community decreased more than half, but that didn't mean that the crime stopped. In fact, it had increased by 32%. The fact that people weren't calling in the crime that they were seeing, they were inadvertently making it into a more dangerous place to live. And the morals of the community is to stick together and help each other out, but they were instead doing the opposite and breaking it up, and they weren't feeling unified. And some first-hand experiences was Lorraine Gray's two sons, who are Native American, went on a college tour a couple states away by themselves. And while they were on the college tour, somebody in their tour group thought that they were being too quiet, so she called the cops on them. And the cops ended up pulling them aside and questioning them. And instead of the cops asking the people in charge of it if they were really supposed to be there because of racial profiling, they just assumed that they were up to no good. And the mother's job is to protect her children, but when they move away, she needs to have trust in the police, but the police are doing the opposite in that by accusing them of stuff. And another example, it was a Muslim woman was trying to switch seats on a plane, and when the flight attendant saw this, she grew uncomfortable and was suspicious, and she had the police escort her off the plane. Rather than somebody like me or you trying to do that, we wouldn't have been given a second glance. And it just shows that the police were just looking at her skin color, and she ended up missing her flight.
So, with any system, there have to be compromises made within it by the people that create it, and this is 100% the case in racial profiling. With racial profiling, although it does not have a malicious intent inherently, it's caused a lot of harm to people and communities that is not needed at all. It has potentially caused a decreased crime rates in some areas, but in most areas, crime rates have just gone up or stayed the same. This is a table 43A by the FBI shows how even more white people in the United States overall in 2012 committed crimes than African Americans, Native Americans, or people of another minority. And so because of this, it can be easily seen that racial profiling on a national level is not needed whatsoever. Okay, so for the counter argument, some would say that it is a police force's job to protect and serve their community. And this means that they need to do their job as best as they can do. And if racial profiling did help the police force to lower crime rates, then this would be perfectly reasonable. But it does not. It causes a lot of distress in communities, which is why it's not a reasonable thing. Some would argue that profiling isn't evil, and that could easily be argued. It could be argued that it's good or that it's bad. But no matter if it's good or bad, in a person's opinion, it doesn't change the fact that it's having negative impacts on a lot of people. And then some would say that it can't be justified because the intent is for the greater good, so there is a lower crime rate overall in the nation. But the fact that it hasn't lowered crime rates at all means that it's not necessary whatsoever.
So our solution, or one of our solutions, was to implicate police body cameras everywhere you can, and give citizens the option of asking the police when interacting with the police to turn off the body cameras. This allows them to keep the right of privacy. Limitations are the police could lie and not turn on the body cameras.
The second solution we have is related to the last one, which if you have the body cameras on, then you can go to court and file against them for using heavy racial profiling tactics. And if a police officer is proven that use that heavy racial profiling tactics, then they would get punished. First sentence would just be getting suspended. Second sentence would get fired, so they would learn the lesson. And then a limitation would be that judges could be biased to determine this, and other people who would determine their punishments and everything like that.
This is our work study.
Okay, a couple of questions for you. Jen, I'm going to start with you. So can you give me one specific way that your thinking had changed as a result of learning about Claire's findings?
So when I learned about how police were becoming more militarized and how the SWAT teams were being deployed even when they didn't need to be, it made me realize how in the United States, like a lot of excessive force is used to deal with minorities on a scale that isn't needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tanner, you're next. What is one way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
The resolutions of racial profiling and how to fix it really impacted my team because mine was basically about politics and laws and everything, and it was basically you either choose not to have it or you do have it, and those were like the only two like boundaries right there. That's the only like two sides you had. When we came up with the resolutions, we realized that we cannot like pick a side, you know. There was no way you're gonna like pass a law to get rid of it completely or keep it, you know. There's always gonna be conflict. So the way I changed was that we would come up with a compromise and it made me think differently from my topic entirely.
Okay, thank you. Claire, this one's for you. How did the group decide to include Jordan's lens or perspective to the overall conclusion, or the overall presentation? Sorry.
Tanner and I had consulted a lot before because ours were closely related, and Jordan was ethical, so it wasn't as much statistics and it was more first-hand accounts, and we realized that her militaristics fit very well with my militaristics, and we blended them there.
Okay, and then finally, Jordan, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem the group identified?
I feel like Tanner's had the most impact because the way I was looking at it was like people's interactions, like how they like think, like morals and everything, but then Tanner showed more of like the law side of it and what people can actually do to help stop it, but it also shows the struggles of people not being able to follow those laws.
Okay, thank you.